Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So some announcements as we do get started. I finally have seen the announcements and had a couple of questions about what are the actual chapters of the material that I gave you. I was under the impression that this looked exactly like the PDF that I have historically been using, which was before this book became free and publicly available, which actually had chapter headings. So let me show you. The indents on the side here kind of tell you the myth of the genius programmer is the first chapter. So everything that is indented from there are all of these sections that belong to the first chapter. If you ever have questions about this, I uploaded this morning the old copy of the book. Since it's freely available, I assume the authors are okay that I upload the scanned PDF of the book that used to not be free, even though it's exactly the same content. So if in the future you ever have questions about exactly what's part of what chapter, in addition to utilizing the what's indented from here, you can also look at the chapter headings from the PDF that I uploaded to campus this morning. On top of that, what else? Plan for this week, we're going to discuss that chapter 1. If you didn't get all the way through it, that's okay. There will be some questions from my list of questions that I want to talk about that are more just abstract. They don't rely on regurgitation of the book material, but just in general, I want to talk about your own experience with some of these concepts, and you should be able to share some of your own concepts, some of your own experience in this as well, if you would like to. Again, I'm not going to cold call on you. I hated that as a student. I assume that you probably do too, so I'm not going to do it to you. That said, I expect there to be some kind of back and forth. So unless you like being stared at awkwardly, some people, please do participate as you are able and willing. If there's time at the end of this period, we'll go back to what we were talking about at the end of last week, which was kind of, we'll start analyzing the waterfall model and pushing that forward as we talk about iterative development, moving our way toward the agile development mindset. So our Discords are created. I saw that most people have joined those Discords. One important thing, and I can post this to the Discord as well, please do change your nickname on those Discord servers to either be your first name, last initial, or first name, last name, something that allows me to identify who you are. It would be terrible if at the end of the quarter you had posted all of this lovely material and I still had no idea who to assign the grade to. So that's something that I would appreciate being done in the next day or two. Our lab period for this week is going to be going over everything related to Git. So I will be talking to you about exactly what I would like for you to do this week as part of that. The first part is to actually go to the Git site. So Git is owned by Atlassian. They have a bunch of excellent beginner tutorials. I'm not going to have time to go over all of this myself. What I do want to go over in our lab period is a more interactive version of this that I will show you. But in preparation for that, it might be worth your time. It is very much worth your time to go through a number of these tutorials. So start with anything that is in the beginner. Go ahead and you can look at getting started. We've already done the repository setting up for you. So you can look at what are the components of the repository as you get added to that repository. So Hunter is going to be going through all of your GitHub usernames, adding you to the associated actual repository that you will be contributing to throughout this quarter. And just knowing all of this in advance will be good. You probably don't need to know too much about the advanced tips yet. Don't worry too much about this. For migrating to Git, you probably don't need to know that, but everything through getting started and collaborating will be good information for you to know. My recommendation is read this before our lab on Wednesday.
So excited to just get force push and just ruin everything for us.
We can have jokes throughout the quarter. I think I mentioned this to a couple of our students on the side, but and I can make this as a sub discussion under 350. But there are tons of excellent Git puns because Git sounds like get. So if you'd like to create your own Git. I don't know, whatever you want for that, you can make some fun with that and make some commands that don't actually exist, but would be fun if they did. Like Git with the times installs Git.
I was thinking getting started and it's not.
They definitely did.
Oh, wait, what are we doing again?
So this page here, atlassian.com/git/tutorials, or if you just Google Git tutorials, this is the actual official tutorial. You can also look at the documentation, just get started learning about Git. That one was way too easy.
It's like how to push into others like that into a server.
Yeah. So that, but also all of the issues that can arise, everything that you would need to be aware of in order to contribute. We're actually going to go over branching in a lot more detail during and what the expectations are with regards to branching and merging in our Wednesday lab, because there are certain ways that I want us to be handling that. And in fact, that will be part of the grade for each sprint is, do you use Git correctly? So we'll talk about exactly what those requirements are and what that means during our Wednesday lab. I don't want to take too much of our actual lecture class time. So the other thing that I've heard from some people is you're thinking about and trying to get started on the project. Do not get started quite yet. The reason that I introduced stuff last week was to give you an idea of the scope of the project. You don't know yet, not all of your team will know how to use Git. You don't want to do too much work before you know how to interface with each other. Otherwise, it will be very much like getting started with code before you've done the planning aspect of it. You'll end up redoing most of that work. It won't go so well. So in general, hold off for a couple more days. The timeline for this first sprint is a little bit longer than the others without having more content, because there's going to be a lot of this onboarding process the first couple of weeks. Questions or concerns about where we're headed this week before we dive into some discussion and reflection on ourselves, our brains, and how we handle each other? Anything else here that I wanted to talk about? I don't think so. So I'm just going to unplug this and we're going to have more of a real chat, because I find that that's the best way to actually have these discussions, is to actually talk to you person to person. This is not meant to be a lecture. There are no right or wrong answers to a lot of these questions. I just want to hear from you about your own experience, and opening up about these kinds of things will help us to be able to understand each other. So we're going to start with kind of a section from the book about focusing on yourself versus focusing on a team when you are a member of a team environment. So I'll start with kind of a broader, more targeted question. How easy is it to control yourself? Your actions, your reactions, how much control do you have over yourself?
100%.
In a perfect world, we have 100% control of ourselves. Is that actually the case in practice? Do we feel like we always have 100% control of how we handle our surroundings? I find that to be one of the easiest signs of determining intelligence is the extent to which we have control of ourselves. Nothing puts us in a situation that is harder to control than just being put in a situation where we have some kind of natural reaction to something. And it really takes every essence of our being to react in a different way than the natural reaction is. If your gut reaction is intense anger, then finding a way to react to that in a way that is better for a collective is more difficult than just letting yourself loose. But note that you have a lot more control over yourself than you do over other people. So how easy is it to control your team? Now you're in a group. Imagine the rest of the quarter. How easy is it to step in and pre-describe everything that everybody else does?
Pretty long to lay out exactly what they gotta do.
Yeah, it's difficult to communicate that. Even if you have an idea of what you want them to do, there are many barriers to them actually doing exactly what you want to do. There's what you say, there's how they interpret what you say. There are tons of factors at play here before we even get to their technical capabilities differ from your technical capabilities. Their preferred languages, their preferred tools, their experience is different from yours.
That reminds me of a video where like the guy's in engineering, he has his kids write him instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, open the jar of peanut butter, put the knife in the peanut butter.
He puts
Take
it
the
in
knife out,
backwards.
yeah, backwards.
Yeah.
Take the, and the kid is like on his 5th rendition of writing, it just like freaks out.
Right. Right, so there's a ton of communication difficulties when it comes to this process. Setting aside just how difficult it is to actually control your team, in your experience, how do people react when you try to control them? Usually it's very defensive, right? They don't want to be controlled. They want to exert the same kind of leadership that you do, whether they're loud about it or not. Does stuff go on behind the scenes that you're not aware of if you're trying to overexert your control? People harbor feelings and emotions that you're not aware of. And that can come back to bite you, even if they say, absolutely, yes, I'm going to go do exactly that. Their mental state may be completely different from your interpretation of their mental state. No one is more aware of this than a professor. People don't call me out on my bullshit enough. Students feel very uncomfortable walking into my office and saying, I actually hate you. I hate your class. I think you're boring. I think you're full of it. You assigned me the wrong grade. They're a grade different from the one that I deserved. And I never want to see you again, let alone take another one of your classes. I've never heard that from a student. Have I deserved it at least once in my life? Maybe, but I don't know. No one's ever told me that. So I have to be very aware of how what I say and do affects the class, because what I want is for the class to learn as much as possible. So taking on that kind of a leadership role in your team is very important, but also very difficult, because you need to find a way to gain your team's trust. You need to find a way to be a leader, but be a leader by listening as much as by telling. Anyone else have any concepts of how easy it is to control yourself, control teams, any stories from trying to do this and the fallout from it? Yeah, let's start here and then.
I think if the goal is clear and the values are the same,
Mm-hmm.
then it would be much easier to coherent the team together. If it's clear, if it is vague, nobody knows what to do, then it's very difficult to get them together and talk on something or do something.
Yeah, so stating the goals, actually coming together as a team. Don't start by pushing goals on other people, but you can start by saying, what are the goals? What are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? And then you can start advocating for your teammates. Rather than stating your goals outright, ask the question. As they tell you what they want, map it to what you want. And then it feels like, from their perspective, they're being listened to, they're being heard, and they're being prioritized. It's exactly the same result as if you stated your goals and just worked toward that from the beginning, but you come across completely differently. There's one here.
Yeah, mine was kind of more on the, like, trying to control people where a team goes. I've been reading this book called Never Split the Difference, which is from a lead FBI hostage negotiator. Like, that's like applied controlling people so someone doesn't die, right? And
Right.
he talks about how hard it is to like get these other people to comply and do what you want to do, not hurt the person, make us pay less money, you know? And you can almost sum up everything he says by like, just listen when someone's talking and ask questions that are not accusations,
Yes.
you know? And I thought that was kind of interesting, like how hard it is to, even if you're a professional at it, you know, sometimes hostages still get taken, they don't make it, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a very important point. Finding ways to communicate with people that don't make them defensive. As soon as they are defensive, fight or flight is initiated. Some people will rise to meet you and create a conflict. Some people will flee, they'll end the negotiation, and you won't have any ability to change what they do or to help them to help you. And then they view you completely differently as someone, and you may not even be aware of any of this going on underneath your behind the scenes. Great points, yeah.
Yeah, nothing too specifics, but it's something I've witnessed a lot at work. When you are assigned a project that others rely on for their own, which you have to complete yours to, so they can progress on your own. They tend to like go towards like, hey, I know you and you alone are supposed to work on this, finish this up. Why not let me come on in? I can help you finish this up a lot faster. And soon it starts becoming crowded, and so you might start getting a little bit more defensive of, you know, give me some space, I got this, and actually, all that external pressure can actually make things worse, because you're, self-conscious about it, rushing,
Right.
trying to meet a deadline now, that was, even though it might be a little different on what they stated, that's something I've witnessed a lot.
You work differently when other people are watching you work or when they're around you than you would if you were just able to work on your own. So I've talked about this a couple times in the class, but self-advocacy is very important for your own process. If you can, rather than reacting defensively to what someone is trying to do, if you can find a way to, one, get across, here are my preferences, but two, say, I recognize that you are trying to help me, that I see the effort that you're putting in for my benefit. I'd like to share with you how I work so that you can best support me and we can move forward together, getting the most done that we can. That kind of pushes things back at them, but in a way where they still feel valued, that you recognize the fact that they're trying to help. Even though it might not be coming across that way emotionally in the moment. You might feel crowded, you might feel pressured, but being able to abstract yourself away from those emotions and respond in a way that prioritizes the group, finding what small ways to be able to handle that and do that will help the group move forward and continue to be productive and healthy moving forward. One and two.
I would say something that I've seen a lot in teams and stuff, especially like the better teams, is like a high emotional intelligence. Just being able to tell the difference between, and like being able to give and receive criticism too is a really big important part of a team, because you're never going to be perfect, and the only way to keep growing as a team is like, sometimes some people have to say the hard stuff, and just being able to know that it's not like an attack on you personally as a person, and it's more of just like as a team. And for us to meet these goals, we have to, like, you have to step it up, or maybe you might have to back off from the situation that you like to do because maybe someone else is better at it. And I just think being able to do that is how really good teams thrive.
I've had a lot of success with starting messages, especially textual messages, with my intended emotional response. And be like, I want to show that this is very important, but I do not want this to come across as a personal attack. It's important to me, but I don't want you to feel called out. I don't want you to feel in this particular way. Start there before you say anything. If you start with what you're going to say, they've already had the associated emotional reaction that they're going to have to the message. Textual chat is incredibly difficult to get across in exactly the way that you intend. Even if you're in person, it's difficult, but it's especially difficult over chat. Great points. So one more and then two. No, good. Right.
I think goes back to just controlling yourself. If I've noticed that if you don't communicate properly, that boundary, because yeah, you don't want to come across as like rude or
Right.
like mean, so you just want to make sure that you're like pleasing the person. But I've noticed that it's easier to work as a team if you just set the boundaries that you need as a person. And or like if someone is like his example, if someone's trying to help you, you're like, I know I can't work like this. It's better if you like you set that right away, because if you don't set a boundary and someone's doing something that's just kind of annoying you or it's bothering you a little bit, you're just gonna harbor some like deep internal hate for them. It's gonna keep building up, even though it started off by like one small tiny thing. If you don't communicate it right away, everything they do is gonna be kind of tainted with this assumption that you had because you didn't communicate it right away. So you have like this bias that they're like always trying to like get in your way. But if you communicated it in the beginning, you could have saw that, oh, they just wanted help because they, for example, didn't feel like they felt like they didn't have much to do, so they wanted help. But now, like, if you don't say that to them, then you have a bias of, oh, they're just trying to like do stuff for me. They don't think I can like, they don't think I'm like competent enough to like finish my own work. But that's like further down the line when you really harbor that in.
Yeah.
And also I've noticed that it's better to not leave any room for thinking, because I feel like with people, they need more reassurance than, or like we need more reassurance than like we show that we need. And so it's nice just thinking of all the possible scenarios that could go wrong, or like all the possible scenarios that they might think of like during a tense situation, and just kind of be like, oh, this is not what I'm trying to come off as, like, I know, like, I would feel like this if I was in your place. And then also having like your team's interest and goal in mind, like he said, because it's better do that, because if you have that goal in your mind all the time, you're less likely to react in a more intense or like hostile way, because anyone's noticed if you like react in a hostile way, then you're not gonna get anything done. You're not going to take a step towards your goal.
Sure.
At all. So it's like you have to kind of tiptoe around, be extremely careful and kind of like hyper fixate on like certain like tones and just facial expressions, because yeah, you have to like attentively listen to them and just make sure that you're working for the goal. And like, this is a very important goal. Yeah.
One important point from that I'd like to especially address early on is recognize when people are accomplishing things and being able to point that out. It's very easy to get stressed, especially near deadlines, apply pressure to people, and when they submit their work, it's kind of an, oh, finally, all right, we're gonna be okay. All right, we're done. And just kind of throw that away. I find that it's very effective if you can find ways to let people know that they've done something well, or they've done something. People respond very well to positivity, to reinforcement of something that they have done. If you can think back, just think of all of the moments that you have been praised for something that you did and how that made you feel. Now imagine if someone had the exact same mental reaction but didn't state it. Would you have felt as good about what it is that you accomplished? Try to provide that for each other in a group, and you will set the tone of, we're all here for each other. We can all help each other. People will be much more emotionally available to admit weakness, admit when they're stuck on something, ask for help, and that will all create less stress at crunch time. When you need them to be communicative, when you need them to be putting forth 100% of their effort, they'll be much more able to do so if they feel they have that support.
That also like reminds me of like your earlier example, when like you give it, or you might have given the student a bad grade, but they felt like they didn't deserve it, but no one told you that, you know, like
Right.
no one told you that, like, oh, I don't deserve this, but like to you, you're just looking at it at a glimpse, like maybe their work wasn't good, you know, maybe it wasn't like meeting the requirements of the class, but to them, it's more like, wow, I put so much work into this, like this is the best that I can do, why is he giving me this grade? But that was never communicated between the two.
Communication is very important. All right, we have a few more things we want to cover. Let's start with a concept that people really don't like to talk about. So we're going to talk about insecurity, because that is a huge part of everyone's lives, and it's not something that's really talked about that much. So take 30 seconds, maybe a minute, brainstorm ways in which you show your own insecurity. This is not something that you have to share, but just self-reflect for a bit about how does that look and feel in yourself? How do you show that? How do you think about it? What does that look like? I can already see facial people like, I really don't want to think about this. I don't want to talk about this. It's really difficult. So I don't really want to have too much of a conversation about how people show their insecurities, but I do want a little bit of self-reflection just on healthy alternatives to showing that insecurity. How can you handle insecurity in a group setting where the focus is on getting work done, being productive? If you make a mistake, it's worth learning from that mistake rather than focusing on that mistake. It's easy to point out an inefficiency that will make someone feel insecure. How can you handle if either you notice someone else looking or feeling insecure? How can you focus on the group? How can you be a leader in that situation? Yeah.
I've noticed when when you're like spiraling into like insecurity, like for example, if you're working on a goal like in a team, and I feel like sometimes it can be selfish when you're spiraling like in an insecure spiral, I guess, because you're only like thinking about yourself. What do they think of me? What do they think of my work? Like how are they seeing what I'm doing, or how are they feeling like that? But you have to kind of be realistic, because I feel like sometimes insecurity can be like a delusion, because you're like, oh, it's kind of like the spotlight effect, because you're living in your own world and you think everyone else is living in your world, looking at you, like thinking of like all the mistakes that you're doing, but that's what everyone else is doing.
Yes, everyone is the center of their own universe.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, you have to realize that you just have to be real with yourself. It's kind of like a black and white situation where it's not just like this whole delusion where everyone's just noticing every mistake I'm making. It's more just, oh, this is a goal and everyone wants to work on this goal. I'm stopping by myself to like actually go to this goal, because like, for example, the book gave an example on like not sharing your code or not sharing your projects with other people. And then it takes you a longer time to finish the project because you're too insecure to show it to other people. And you can like see the mistakes that you can make. Like if I had a code with my team and I didn't want to show them because I'm like, okay, they're gonna think I'm stupid.
Right.
But no, they're not. They just want to finish the goal and finish the project. And so
Yes.
they're gonna see the mistake as a mistake, not a mistake on my like who I am as a person. And you need to like really differentiate that.
Yes, the focus should always be on how do we move forward from here, not assigning blame. I like to think of it as a very easy distinction. If you find yourself looking backwards in time and analyzing something that happened in the past, that easily spirals into blame, because we're trying to figure out why did that happen. The easy way to not assign blame in that case is just to accept where we are is where we are. How do we move forward from it? What do we do to move forward from where we are? Where we are is just given. We have all of these brains in this group. We have here that we need to be. How do we move from here to there? Forward thinking just accepts that. Yeah.
You know, I don't mind sharing this about myself, because I feel like it's pretty common amongst others. One insecurity I sometimes battle with is, I always compare myself against my older self. I always,
Yes.
like, for example, in high school, I feel like I was a lot more proficient and more cognitive in mathematics. I lapsed for a bit, like I might have lost some skills, and I sometimes dwell on that. But at the same time, I also have to do a comparative analysis of what I was then versus what I am now. I have a lot more responsibilities. I have bills to pay. I have compared to like 1 hour classes in high school, I have 3 hour classes that demand more of my time. And just, that's the key thing, just explain away like, what is so different now versus then? Why am I like this? Am I really that much different compared to then? Or am I misremembering things? That's something I definitely had to work on.
But yeah, that's a very important point. You can compare yourself to past you to see that, hey, I've learned some things. I have some skills that I didn't have in the past. And if you find yourself dwelling on, I feel like I was better at math some time ago than I am today, realize I learned that stuff then. That is something that I was capable of doing then. I have learned since then, I have grown since then, I will be capable of relearning that material and possibly learning more material, finding a positive mindset, a way to look at yourself is a good way to move forward. Yeah,
I think it's really just like kind of taking the people in around you and just like picking their brain and like getting an understanding of like even outside of like what's being taught on the whiteboard, whatever's brought up by the professor in place, because there's been plenty of time where like throughout my time in the whole program where it's just like I always compare I've kind of had moments where it's like, why am I even trying to go for this? Everyone else in this room, no matter how far I've come, has like far greater knowledge and experience of every single little thing that even I wouldn't even bother looking into. And it's just, you know, it's a great thing. And I think like, oh, it'd be fool of me to just ask for help constantly, but it's just like, in this sort of department, you need that. You need to get with people together.
two things. People love talking about their experience. People love explaining things that they know to other people. So tap into that wherever you can. If you express curiosity about what someone else knows, rather than admitting that, hey, I don't know that. If you can find a way to portray that in a way that says, you seem like you really know what you're doing when it comes to this. Could you enlighten me on this? They'll go like, oh, I do. Let me show you, because it's a way for them to feel good about themselves. I also, since I was feeling this in graduate school, we all feel like everyone around us has more life experience, knows more, when the reality is we're not loud and vocal when we don't know something. We keep that inside, that entire feeling of I don't know what I'm doing. If everyone, whenever you felt like I don't know what I'm doing, just shouted, I don't know what I'm doing, this building would be deafening. It would be happening all the time. People would be consistently saying that. But because we don't, it gives the illusion that everyone around us knows significantly more than we do, when in fact, we just have different subsets of knowledge. We all know different things, we all have different life experience, we can all learn a lot from each other. And just because one person is asking another person a question at a particular point in time does not mean any one of them is smarter than the other, has more knowledge than the other. It's just a different slice of the pie, what one person knows and one person doesn't. That does not generalize to more than that. So feel free at any point to admit, I don't know something. It really doesn't say as much as you think it does.
I think it's also important in this field to realize just how much there is in the field of computer science and just how much of a general, we're going through, of just education of how to do half of what this field does. Because like, I just out of curiosity, just because I like it, and some YouTubers watched explained very briefly the kinematics for animation, I'm like, oh, okay, that's super complicated. To make a leg walk or push an object. I'm like, okay, so I understand the higher level idea. I have no idea how you got the rest of that skeleton to be rigged, how you decide the pivot points. I mean, we're dealing with a ton of stuff here, and I try to remind myself, it's like, hey, dude, sure you did this stuff and you know how to do these things, but you've only begun, and this is basically the absolute bedrock and foundation of how to build every single other skill that you will need for industry.
We have like 5 more points I want to get to in 15 minutes to do them. So I'm going to try to be a little bit briefer about some of this. Has been great conversation. I really wish we had about 5 hours to do this. Some of you probably wish we did not have 5 hours to do this. It would be a very long class. I think we'd all be tired by the end, but. So one other point the book brought up is that we idolize individuals over teams. We always have to assign a name to something. Why do we think that is? We want to quickly summarize their thoughts on why we as humans desire to attribute what a lot of people worked on to a single individual. Yeah,
Because we're a single individual, we want to think we could have done that.
sure.
We required help to do it.
Yeah, if you actually look at the number of people who are responsible for something, it's like, think of the first movie that comes to mind. How many people do you know who were responsible for working on that movie? Do you know the director's name? Do you know the lead actor's name? Do you know the supporting actors' names? Do you know, whenever the credits roll, how many names were there associated with everything bringing that together? Why do we assign so much value to certain roles in this, but not to those who are doing important work behind the scenes?
I guess almost kind of, especially like the lottery, or like, we're pretty good at like quick little numbers, but as soon as it's more than like 15, you like lose all perception. You know what I mean?
Right. But we still want to assign something, like
Yeah.
someone did
Yeah,
this.
this guy did this, when it's like 10,000 people work on it.
Right. So there are lots of benefits to working in a team. There's no way that movie would have been produced and been around for you to watch if there were just a few people or an individual working on that. So there are lots of benefits of working.
Human behavior, it's kind of hard to see something that, like, we've always looked for things that sound like we can't do that, or we always look for things that we can't have, you know? Like, how many times have you, like, realized that the stuff that you have right now, or where you are, or where you're at right now is actually where you wanted to be, like, last year? You forget that.
Right.
And so like, if people really, like, if people realize that, like the movie example, that people realize that it took like thousands of people to build this movie, it would sound more realistic. And they're like, oh, anyone could do this, you know? And they're like, they wouldn't have kind of like that high you get from being like, whoa, they did this. So like, if that one star actor, like, they're putting all the responsibility on that, and like, oh, they did all of this, or the reason that this happened, that sounds less realistic, and they're like, wow, I really want that, because that's like not something that's normal to me, you know? And so they're just looking for things that are less realistic to them.
We all have the same number of hours in the day, even people we idolize. They're probably utilizing a lot more behind the scenes because they don't have any longer of a work day than we do, plus a little bit of overtime and crunch time. Yeah, back.
Neil Breen doesn't need a crew to make moves.
Fair.
And we see the results of that.
So I do see other hands. Unfortunately, there are still quite a few things I want to, if we want to come back to this and if we have time, I would love to hear from people. If you want to come back to my office afterwards and have a discussion about this, I'd be happy to do that as well. So what was the bus factor? Can anyone describe or talk about the bus factor? Yeah.
Bus factor is basically that if you got hit by a bus, then your project will be done if you only work on it alone. So you want to have like more than just yourself that knows about whatever topic or thing that your team's working on.
Yes. Basically, if one member of your team gets hit by a bus, how much added time will it take to finish the project? And if there is shared knowledge, if everyone's being communicative about everything that is happening, you minimize that bus factor, the extra added time that it would take to finish a project. So relevant to this class in that you're in a team, you want to be able to, people are going to get sick, people are going to get busy, things are going to happen that will knock out one of your team members for a day, for a few days. You can't rely on everyone always being at 100% all the time. We all have days where we cannot give 100% and we can't necessarily plan that in advance. Don't rely on it of others. And that way you can experience a little bit of all right, I don't feel like I'm letting my team down as much. If you need to take a little bit of extra time to prioritize yourself, your own mental health, your own physical health, if something happens, other aspects of your life that come up and take priority. Treat each other like humans, treat each other like you would like to be treated if you were going through the same thing that they are going through, and recognize that the more work you get done in advance, the less pressure there will be. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, giving it a little bit deeper thought, in terms of the bus factor, yeah, you want to be very communicative with your members as well. Make sure, like, show all your work, so you're not leaving in the dark in case something were to happen, after the project. But yeah, at the same time, you kind of want to be irreplaceable. You want to have actual value, like, to contribute to the project. Like, if you're a disappear, you want to be something invaluable to development. Otherwise, you don't really have a lot of sway in the creative process. Like, in the workplace, like, oh, well, I manage the SCCM environment, or I manage this process, and I actually have this expertise that you would not handle if I were to go my way or the highway. Like, you don't want to be overbearing, but you also want to butcher my explanation.
No, it makes perfect sense. I think that's a very technical focus. Like, you want to be someone who has some kind of technical expertise. Your team as a whole will be able to produce more and faster if you share the knowledge that you have. I like to think of it as the value that I bring, wherever I bring it, is in my leadership. Regardless of what I bring to the table technically, if what you do keeps the group together, keeps the group focused, keeps the group moving forward, regardless of what I know technologically, if you remove me, the group might fall apart. If every group member is like that and is looking out for the group, where they're focused on some aspect of the group, then every group member is irreplaceable, and not just for the technical expertise that you bring. So think about the technical expertise that you bring as much of it as you can, but also work on those leadership and communication qualities, because that by itself may make you irreplaceable. Yeah.
That also reminds me of, like, if you were a leader of the group, and you were hiring people that have all these skills that you needed for this project,
Mm-hmm.
and then you completely stay out of it and just would have them do their thing and then show the finished project, and the project's great, but like, deep down, you feel like you didn't actually earn it, or like you're not as passionate about this project because you weren't there learning about like their knowledge and like everyone else's knowledge and like their input on it, and just like, it just feels like you didn't actually earn project because you weren't really involved, you just got it. It's kind of like instant gratification, because you're not doing the work to actually be gratified. You're just getting it right away, and it just, I don't know.
Makes sense. If you find yourself negatively thinking about something like that, recognize that it's backwards thinking. You're looking back at a project that's already completed. If you're dissatisfied with it, the healthiest question you can ask yourself is, why am I dissatisfied with it? What can I do moving forward to be less dissatisfied about future projects? How does that inform my mental approach to something? My outside of work hours, that level of backwards thinking, if it's for how to move forward in the future, I find that to be healthy. And if it's just looking backwards to say, I'm not happy with how this went, I'm embarrassed, there's no action you can take away from that. It's not actionable. It's not gonna help you in the future. You're just ruminating. You find yourself ruminating, it's useless, a waste of time.
If you assess like your actions, you can also assess other people's actions, because if you're like focusing on yourself, you're also focusing on human behavior. And so looking at the process of like what made you think like that and why you feel like that, and also think of others. Other people might feel that way.
Last couple really important things I wanted to cover: HRT, humility, respect, and trust. The book brings up those three aspects as humility, expecting that your teammates don't share the exact same information that you do. Listen to them, trust them as part of the trust, and just be the best person that you can, treating them like you would like to be treated. I think that creates a really good group environment. The last technical aspect was a post-mortem. What was a post-mortem? What did a post-mortem contain?
Documentation about how you messed up.
Yeah, and that's perfectly okay to have that because it's actually useful to anyone who's coming back to this. Just imagine taking over a product and trying to figure out how to move forward. If you had the documentation of past mistakes that were made, how useful is that? That is so useful. You can learn from that. You can move forward with that. It's incredibly useful. So a postmortem contains a summary, what happened, what went wrong, what was the cause, to the best of your understanding, what caused the issue. Damage assessment, how do we move forward, what is wrong, and actions that were taken to fix the problem, what did we attempt to do, what worked. Action items to prevent that from reoccurring, what can we do in the meantime to make sure that something like this did not happen again, and any lessons that you learned from the entire process. There is nothing wrong with writing all of that down. Just doing that level of reflecting will help you learn and grow as a person. It will help admit to the rest of your team that I am just human, just like you are. And moving forward, it's excellent technical documentation. So it's useful after just about anything goes wrong, as soon as you have the time to dissect what happened and what can I learn from it.
It also like allows the team to communicate like your wrongdoings and just tell you, oh, I didn't like it when you did this and this is why. And then you can like see like actual documentation, like why this action that you did affected the team or affected the goal. And it's a nice way to be like, okay, this is the last chance. If I did anything wrong, let's let me know.
Absolutely. The last thing that I really want to talk about, there were a couple other things, but criticism is a very important part of working with other people. So thinking about when is it okay to criticize another person? People are going to make mistakes, but when should we actively focus on criticism? If you are being criticized, how should you handle that in a way that prioritizes the group? So remember that the entire purpose of criticism is to be able to communicate something happened in a way that I really don't want to happen again. So think about how to prioritize the group when you do that. If someone is criticizing you, how can you, rather than immediately being defensive, how can you prioritize the group in your response to that criticism? Yeah.
I think if you're trying to communicate something to someone and you're not sure if it's gonna sound critical or not, I think a good way is to kind of take a look and see what your intentions are behind what you want to say. Like, is it because you want to be petty or get back at them, or is it because, oh, you didn't really like it and there's this and this and this as to why you didn't like it, and you like respect the person enough to tell them, oh, I don't like this and I still want to like keep you in my life or anything like that, but
You need something from them in the future.
yeah.
Right? There are gonna be due dates. They have to work with you moving forward. You want that to be as positive as possible. The best advice that I can give for giving or receiving criticism, put yourself in the other person's shoes, flip the conversation around. Think about, if I were being criticized for this thing that I just did, what would ease the burden? What would make this the easiest way to receive that criticism with the purpose of moving forward and actually changing that behavior, not just becoming defensive? Flip it back around, become the criticizer again, and deliver whatever you need to set the tone, make sure you choose your words very carefully, because people like to attach themselves to particular words that are said. They think that you mean something when you say a particular word. So the exact words that you choose are very important for the end result of that communication. And just be human, treat the other person like a human. I just have to come back to that again and again. We are out of time for today. We're gonna come back and actually talk more technically again tomorrow. When we have our lab on Wednesday. Hopefully this was useful. Keep it in mind throughout the quarter. And I would love to continue talking about it. If people have anything else to add, things will come up throughout the quarter.
I got a couple of meetings.
In shaving creature. Just like.
We just branch off. It's basically partly true. There's always Mike. Know exactly. What's that's where you realize.
Would be more.
So you have.
Real work for one is
Still the deadline.
So I can tell you some problem before next Monday.
Some people that I talk to
The textbook is something like this next Monday. I don't know. Pressure is out. Every single girl, I think that especially.
Our team, right? We are to find people, if we kind of
Of
divide or
communicating, how to
separate that
communicate
vision
each other.
towards everybody.
Work with
else,
each other for the next
kind
10
of
weeks.
come to the
Yeah,
same
you're
thing that
it's
work
always
for
a
everybody,
challenge.
right?
You
So
piss
if
someone
we
off,
finish,
you want, they're gonna want to dig
like
into the next
Tuesday,
10
we hit up
weeks.
the deadline.
So thinking about that.
First impressions are huge, I definitely know that.
I can make
yeah,
that
thank you, sir.
consideration,
Yeah,
depends on
me
the
too.
workload, I can say like,
Tomorrow.
hey. Our personal deadline will be